The moment his thumb brushed across my wrist, I froze, praying he hadn't felt the birthmark, the tiny flaw that Isabella didn't have. It was only a fraction of a second, but it felt like hours. His touch lingered for a heartbeat too long, and my stomach twisted in panic. I tried not to flinch as I reached for the pen at the marriage bureau, but I could feel his dark eyes on me, watching every movement like a hawk. I focused on the task, making sure the pen was steady in my trembling fingers. The netted veil of my fascinator cast a shadow across my face, a small mercy in the suffocating silence between us, but my wrists were exposed, bare and vulnerable. The clerk, oblivious to the tension in the air, simply asked for my identification. I swallowed, a dry lump in my throat, and slid my driver's license across the counter. Hesaba. Not Isabella. It was close enough, I thought, as I tried to steady my breath. He didn't seem to notice the slip. He didn't even blink, but I saw his eyes flicker to the name before returning to the paperwork. Was he suspicious? Or was I just imagining it? He said nothing. Nothing at all. He just signed his name, Dante Calabresi, in dark, deliberate strokes, and the weight of it pressed down on my chest. Mr. and Mrs. Calabresi, best wishes to you both, the clerk said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. It was official now. I was married to a man I didn't know, a man I had only seen once in a photograph, and whose name I'd only seen on a document. His thumb brushed against my wrist again, and my heart skipped a beat. Did he feel it? Did he know? I didn't know. But in that moment, I realized I had just legally bound myself to someone whose first name I had only just learned. Dante. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be the one standing at the altar, taking Isabella's place. But my sister couldn't go through with it. Isabella was supposed to marry him, the heir to the Calabresi family, the Mafia boss who controlled Napa Valley with a fist of iron. The marriage was meant to end a feud that had stained the valley with blood for generations, but she couldn't do it. And so, I was here, taking her place for her. 3 days ago, I stood in Isabella's bedroom, watching her cry, her phone pressed to her ear, as her boyfriend begged her not to go through with the marriage. The mansion was silent except for the muffled sobs of my twin, the one who had been chosen for this life of sacrifice. Not me. I was the backup, the spare, the one who fixed everything when it went wrong. Isabella, you can't. Lorenzo's voice echoed through the thin walls, desperate and pleading. I love you. I can't let you marry him. I hadn't meant to listen, but I couldn't help it. The walls were too thin, and I had been trained to listen, trained to fix. I can't do this, Isabella had whispered, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I love him. I can't marry someone else. That was when I had decided. I couldn't let her do it. I couldn't let her walk into a life of misery. A life where she would have to leave everything she loved behind, including Lorenzo. What if you didn't have to? I had asked, the plan falling into place before I could even think twice. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear and hopelessness. She knew what I meant. She knew I had a way out for her. I would take her place. The wedding was only days away, and the marriage license appointment was in 3. Our mother wouldn't question it. She was too distracted by Isabella's panic, too relieved that someone was managing her breakdown. What our mother didn't know was that Isabella's boyfriend had a plan to whisk her away to Paris, a plan I would help her execute. I would make it happen. That night, after I drove home alone, I called our mother and told her Isabella had food poisoning and would be staying at my apartment. I wasn't sure she bought it, but she didn't argue. And the next morning, dressed in one of Isabella's outfits, I walked into the family estate, knowing that I was about to change everything. Isabella was gone. She left in the night with Lorenzo. I had lied, but I hadn't needed to lie long. Our mother collapsed onto the bed, panic seeping into her features as she understood what I meant. Your father will kill her, she whispered, trembling. And the Calabresi family, Isabella, do you understand what this means? They'll see it as a declaration of war? No, they won't, I replied, calm. Not if someone still shows up to sign the marriage license. Not if the alliance stays intact. It was the only way. Isabella's name was already written on the license, the official one that would seal the deal with Dante. But I wasn't Isabella. I was her twin sister. I was the one who made things work when they fell apart. And today, I would be her. The plan worked. Our mother didn't stop me. No one did. No one questioned that I was Isabella, the bride who would save us all. The marriage was finalized. I was married to the Mafia boss, a man whose name I barely knew, but whose world I was now a part of. But as Dante studied me in that courthouse, his gaze sharp, his eyes cold and calculating, I knew the truth. He saw through me, and somehow he was waiting for me to admit it. "Your mother didn't come," he said, breaking the silence. "She wasn't feeling well," I answered, keeping my tone light, but inside, everything was unraveling. His eyes dropped to my wrist, and I felt that familiar pang of fear. He knew. But would he say anything? He didn't. But something in the way he looked at me told me that I wasn't fooling him. He wasn't fooled by the names, the disguise, or the fake smiles. Dante was no ordinary man, and I had no idea what I just signed up for. We left the courthouse in silence. Dante's hand was warm on my back as he guided me to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that seemed as cold and intimidating as the man beside me. He opened the door for me and I slipped inside, the air in the car thick with tension. The leather seats creaked under my weight as I sat, my heart thumping in my chest. When he slid into the driver's seat, I was acutely aware of how close we were. The space between us felt small, too small for the lies we were living. He started the engine, but instead of pulling away, he turned to face me. His dark eyes were piercing, studying me with an intensity I couldn't escape. "You're nervous," he observed quietly. "It's a big day," I replied, forcing myself to sound calm. "Yes, it is," he agreed. His gaze didn't waver from mine, and for a moment, it felt like he could see straight through me. "Tell me something, Isabella." The use of my real name hit me like a punch to the gut. Every muscle in my body froze. How did he know? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. He was watching me closely, that calculating expression never leaving his face. I could feel his thumb brush against my wrist, and my pulse skyrocketed. He pressed a little harder this time, as if confirming something. "This mark," he said, his voice low, "wasn't in any of the photos I received of my bride." My heart stopped. "And the name on your identification is Isabella, not Isabella," he continued, his voice calm, almost too calm. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. I was frozen, trapped in this moment that I had never imagined, with a man who seemed to have all the power. Dante's hand left my wrist, but his eyes stayed locked on mine, assessing. Then, without waiting for a response, he leaned back in his seat, his posture relaxed, but his expression unreadable. "So, before we go any further," he said, his tone casual, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, "I think you owe me an explanation." I forced myself to breathe, but every inhale felt sharp, every exhale too slow. This was it. This was where the truth would come out. This was the moment I had tried to avoid, the moment where I would have to admit everything. The guilt twisted in my stomach, but the truth slipped out before I could stop it. "My sister, Isabella," I began, my voice unsteady. "She couldn't go through with it. She didn't want to marry you. She couldn't marry anyone else. She loves someone else. And I couldn't let her live this life, so I took her place." There it was, the confession. His gaze never wavered. He didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of surprise. It was like he already knew. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he processed my words. "You thought I wouldn't notice the substitution," he said, his voice flat. I swallowed hard. "I thought you'd never met either of us. I thought the names were close enough. I hoped you wouldn't look too closely." Dante's lips twitched into a small, calculating smile. "I look closely at everything," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "especially at deals that are supposed to save my family from a war." I didn't know what to say to that. He had seen through me. He had known, or suspected, from the very beginning. And yet, he had played along. "Why didn't you stop the signing?" I finally asked, the question tumbling out before I could think twice. "Why go through with it at all if you knew?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned the car out of the parking lot, the tires humming against the asphalt. The silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. "I couldn't expose you in front of the clerk," he said finally, his voice colder than before. "If I did, it would have meant your immediate death and my public humiliation. Neither outcome serves my interests." He paused for a beat before continuing. "This way, the alliance stays intact. The marriage remains legal. You and I have leverage. The deal stays solid." Leverage. That's what I was now. Nothing more than a pawn in a game I hadn't fully understood. I didn't know if I should feel relief or fear. I had gotten away with it. For now. His gaze flicked to me briefly before he turned back to the road. "The question is, Isabella, can you handle it? Can you play the role of my wife? Perfectly, in front of my family, your family, everyone." I felt the weight of his question, his expectation. "Yes," I said quietly, meeting his eyes for the first time since the confession. "I can." The car slid down the winding road toward his estate. The vineyards spread out before us, the rows of grapevines stretching endlessly, a perfect metaphor for the life I had just walked into. Beautiful on the surface, but beneath it, full of secrets, tension, and danger. When we reached the estate, Dante parked in front of a massive stone house that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. But this wasn't a fairy tale. This was the heart of the Calabrese family empire. He opened my door and helped me out of the car, his hand lingering at the small of my back as he guided me inside. His touch was possessive, like he was marking his territory. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a lion's den. Inside, the house was cold, modern and sterile, a far cry from the warmth of the family home I'd grown up in. We passed through a grand foyer, the floors polished marble, the walls lined with expensive artwork. Everything here screamed wealth and power. We were met by a woman, her hair gray and neat, her expression welcoming but calculated. She must have been his housekeeper, Mrs. Alberti. "Mrs. Calabrese," she greeted me, her smile polite but not warm. "Welcome to the estate. We're so pleased to have you here." I returned the smile, my mind racing. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Dante led me through the halls, every step echoing in the vast emptiness. I was about to enter a world I couldn't possibly comprehend, and the man beside me, this stranger I had married, was the one pulling the strings. I had no choice but to play along, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a cliff, one wrong move away from falling into a void I might never escape. I had no idea what was waiting for me in this new life, but one thing was certain: nothing would be simple. And Dante Calabrese, the man I had just bound myself to, would make sure of that. He led me into a sitting room that overlooked the vineyards. The silence between us was thick with anticipation, with questions we both knew wouldn't be answered tonight. Tomorrow, I would meet his family. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. And I would have to be perfect. Because one mistake, one slip-up, and the alliance I had just signed away my life for would crumble, and everything would fall apart. The next morning, I woke up to the heavy silence of the Calabrese estate. It felt like I was living inside a fortress. The walls were too tall, the air too still, as if everything here was carefully controlled, like a bomb waiting to explode. The room I was staying in, Isabella's room, now mine, was luxurious but impersonal. The bed was vast, the sheets smooth silk, but they did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. I hadn't slept well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dante's dark gaze, felt the weight of his presence next to me in the car, the way his touch had lingered on my wrist, almost as if he were trying to read me. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if he had already figured me out or if he was waiting to see just how long I could keep pretending to be my sister. I rolled out of bed, the soft carpet under my feet barely making a sound. I looked out the window, and the view of the valley was stunning. Vineyards stretched out beneath me like an endless sea of green, the sun casting a soft golden glow over the rows of grapevines. It should have been peaceful, beautiful. But all I could think about was how trapped I was. I had told myself I was doing this for Isabella, that I was saving her from a life with a man she didn't love. But every time I thought about that, the reality of my own situation hit me harder. I wasn't just playing her role, I was living it. I was now a part of this dangerous, cutthroat world, and there was no going back. When I stepped out of the room, I found Mrs. Alberti waiting outside the door with a tray of coffee and a soft smile. She looked at me with polite curiosity, like she was studying me, trying to see if I was a worthy addition to the family. "Good morning, Mrs. Calabresi," she said, her tone warm but formal. "I hope you slept well." "Good morning," I replied, taking the coffee from her with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Yes, thank you." She nodded. "Your husband has asked for you to join him for breakfast. It's a family gathering. Very informal, but your presence is important." Of course it was. The Calabresi family would always be watching, judging. They'd want to see if I could handle the role of Dante's wife, or if I was a fraud, a liar. I nodded, trying to push down the panic clawing at my throat. "I'll be down in a moment." Mrs. Alberti hesitated for a second, then smiled. "We're all happy to have you here, Isabella. It's good to see the alliance finally taking shape." She was still calling me Isabella. I couldn't correct her. Not yet. Not until it was absolutely necessary. After she left, I took a moment to pull myself together. I smoothed down the cream-colored dress I was wearing. Isabella's dress, of course. Adjusted my hair and breathed deeply. I had to be Isabella. I couldn't afford to be anything else, not in front of anyone else. When I made my way downstairs, I found Dante already seated at a long, polished wooden table. The kitchen was bustling with activity, a few staff members moving around, preparing for the day ahead. Dante looked up as I entered, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. It was almost like he was waiting for me to slip, to break character. I couldn't let that happen. "Good morning, wife," he said with a calm smile, his voice smooth and low. He nodded for me to sit beside him. The seat next to him was already set, as though he'd planned this before I even arrived. "Good morning," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. As I sat down, I could feel the weight of his gaze on me. He didn't say anything more, just watched me, his eyes intense and calculating. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always studying me, like I was some kind of puzzle he was trying to solve. I wasn't sure if that was comforting or terrifying. The rest of the family trickled in after a few minutes, and I immediately began observing them, just as Dante had instructed. I had to get a read on everyone, know who was aligned with whom, who would be an ally, and who might be a threat. Adriana, Dante's sister, was the first to sit down next to me. She smiled warmly, her dark eyes flickering with something unreadable. She was beautiful, sharp, and seemed genuinely interested in making me feel welcome. "It's good to finally meet you, Isabella," she said, her voice smooth, but there was a hint of something underneath. Curiosity, maybe. "I've heard so much about you. I'm glad the alliance is finally in place." I smiled back, keeping my tone light. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Adriana. I've heard a lot about you as well." Dante watched us closely from across the table, his expression unreadable. The rest of the family came in, and I was introduced to a few more people. Cousins, uncles, business associates, all of them warm but guarded. I could feel the tension in the air, a silent evaluation happening as they tried to gauge whether I was really Isabella or not. I smiled and spoke when necessary, but inside I was a mess. Every word felt like a performance, every movement calculated. The slightest mistake would give me away. Finally, Franco walked in, his presence commanding attention the moment he stepped through the door. He was tall, older than Dante, with graying hair and sharp features. He had a cold, calculating air about him, and I could feel the weight of his gaze as he looked at me. His eyes narrowed, and I could tell he was studying me just as intensely as Dante had been. Franco didn't say much at first. He just nodded at me, his smile tight, his handshake too firm. I had no doubt he was sizing me up, looking for any weakness, any sign that I wasn't who I claimed to be. The breakfast continued in strained politeness, and as I glanced around, I noticed how everyone's eyes seemed to linger on me a little too long. They were all watching for cracks in the facade. After breakfast, Dante took me aside. His expression was unreadable, his jaw tense. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. He led me outside to the terrace, the sun still rising over the vineyards, casting long shadows across the ground. "Tonight, we meet with the family. I'll be watching. You need to keep your guard up. Don't give anyone any reason to question you." "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm counting on you, Isabella," he said, using my real name again. "You're playing a dangerous game. If anyone finds out the truth, it's not just your life at risk. It's mine too." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "I understand." Quote. He studied me for a moment, his dark eyes flickering with something that almost felt like respect, but then his expression hardened again. "Good, because if we fail tonight, everything we've worked for will fall apart. I'm not going to let that happen." I didn't reply, my thoughts racing. He was right. The stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. This wasn't just about keeping my sister safe anymore. This was about survival. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. As Dante led me back inside, I realized that I wasn't just playing a role. I was becoming a part of this world, whether I wanted to or not. And the worst part? I didn't know if I was ready for what was coming next. The hours leading up to the family dinner felt like a countdown to a ticking bomb. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, that tonight would be the moment when everything I had worked for, the lies, the deception, would either unravel or solidify my place in this dangerous world. The Calabrese estate felt colder than usual. The long hallways echoed with each step I took, and the weight of the situation pressed down on me like a suffocating fog. I had spent the entire afternoon getting ready, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist, my makeup flawless, the deep burgundy silk dress hugging my curves in a way that felt foreign. It wasn't me. It was Isabella, the woman who had been groomed for this life. But tonight, I wasn't just pretending to be her. I was her. Or I had to be. Dante had made it clear that the family would be watching, studying every movement, every word. They needed to see that I was perfect, that I could handle this life. And I had to believe that if I made it through this night, I might actually have a chance of surviving in this world. But if I failed, if I let even the smallest crack show, everything would fall apart. I walked downstairs to the dining room, my heart pounding in my chest. The house felt eerily quiet, the air thick with anticipation. I could already hear the murmur of conversation from the dining room as I approached. When I entered, all eyes turned to me. I had barely taken 2 steps before Dante's presence was felt beside me, his hand resting at the small of my back, guiding me into the room. He led me to my seat, right next to him at the head of the table. The rest of the family followed suit, their eyes sharp as they observed my every move. Franco sat across from me, his eyes narrowing slightly as he watched me. His gaze was colder than ever, and I could feel the weight of it, the judgment. He didn't trust me, and I knew he was looking for any excuse to expose me. He was looking for the weakness in the facade, and I had to make sure he didn't find it. Dante greeted the family, his voice commanding attention, but I could feel the tension rising. Every word, every gesture felt like a performance. I had to keep my composure, keep my emotions in check. One wrong move, one slip-up, and the truth would come crashing down. Dinner began, but the conversation felt like it was happening in slow motion. I smiled, nodded, and listened, answering questions with practiced ease. I could hear the low hum of voices around me, the occasional clink of silverware, but I was hyper-aware of the silent assessments happening in the room. They were watching me. They were waiting. Then, Franco raised his glass, a smile stretching across his face as he prepared to make a toast. I felt a shiver of dread roll through me. His smile was too smooth, too calculated. I could tell he was about to test me. And I couldn't afford to fail. "To the bride," Franco said, his voice smooth but with an edge that made my stomach twist. "May she prove worthy of the family she's married into." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye on me, waiting to see how I would respond. I didn't hesitate. I stood, my glass in hand, my heart pounding in my chest. "Thank you, Franco," I said, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. I know this family has endured much, and I promise to work every day to prove that I am worthy of the trust you've placed in me." Quote. The words felt strange on my tongue, but I didn't falter. I had to play the role, play it well. Loyalty, unity, and strength. I continued, meeting Franco's gaze with a calmness I didn't feel. "That is what I've learned here, and that is what I will bring to this family. Together we will build something stronger than what came before us." I saw a flicker of surprise in Franco's eyes, but his smile never wavered. He lowered his glass, nodding slightly. "Well said," he murmured, but I could tell the challenge wasn't over. The rest of the dinner passed in strained pleasantries. I could feel the weight of every conversation, every glance. I kept my focus, my mind alert, trying to pick up any hint of suspicion, any subtle sign that someone had seen through the act. But as the evening wore on, it became clear that no one was willing to speak openly about their doubts. They were all waiting for the perfect moment to strike, to see if I would crack. When dessert arrived, I finally allowed myself to relax slightly. But just as I thought the tension might ease, Marco Romano, Dante's consigliere, appeared at my side. He was quiet, his presence like a shadow, but there was something about him that made my skin prickle. His sharp eyes studied me, taking in every detail of the evening, every word I had said. "Mrs. Calabresi," he said, his voice cultured and precise. "You handled yourself well tonight." I forced a smile. "Thank you." "I don't believe Franco expected that," he continued, his eyes flickering with interest. "But I have to warn you, Mrs. Calabresi, he's not done testing you." I nodded, my heart skipping a beat. "I know." "He's already investigating," Marco said quietly. "He doesn't believe this marriage is what it seems. He's looking for cracks, inconsistencies. And if he finds them, it will be over for both you and Dante." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I'm not hiding anything," I said, my voice steady. Marco raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." Before I could respond, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with a sense of unease settling in my chest. I had known Franco was dangerous, but hearing it from Marco, hearing the certainty in his words, it made everything feel even more real. I found Dante shortly after, standing at the edge of the room, his eyes scanning the crowd with a cold intensity. He looked at me, his expression softening for the briefest moment. "You did well," he said quietly, his voice low, but there was something in his gaze that made my chest tighten. "Better than I expected." I nodded, but the weight of Marco's words still hung heavily in the air. "Franco is investigating," Marco warned me. "He doesn't believe the marriage is real." Dante's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything immediately. He just nodded, his eyes scanning the room once more. "We'll handle it," he said finally, his voice hard with resolve. "But I need you to be ready. Franco won't stop until he has something. We need to stay one step ahead of him." I felt a rush of determination flood through me. I wasn't just playing a role anymore. I was in this. In this marriage, in this world, with Dante, whether I wanted to be or not. As the dinner wound down, Dante and I exchanged a few quiet words, our connection growing stronger in the midst of the tension that surrounded us. The alliance we had formed, based on lies and deception, was becoming something more, something real. When the last of the guests left, I found myself alone with Dante once again. His gaze was sharp, calculating, but there was something else in his eyes too. Something softer, something I couldn't quite define. "We made it through tonight," he said, his voice low. "For now," I replied, my mind racing with everything that could still go wrong. Dante stepped closer, his hand finding mine. "Tomorrow we make our move." I nodded, but inside I was conflicted. I had never expected to feel this way. I had never planned for the possibility that I might want something real with him. But as we stood there, together in the quiet of the night, I couldn't deny it anymore. I wasn't just playing a part. I was becoming a part of this dangerous, beautiful world, and of Dante Calabresi's life. The game wasn't over. But for the first time since I had taken my sister's place at the altar, I wasn't sure I wanted it to be.